AstroAccess, November 12, 2021. Mission AstroAccess Ambassador Panel.
All right, fantastic. We are now ready to go ahead and get started. So I'd like to welcome everyone to our first plenary session of the 2021 AstroAccess Conference, the Mission AstroAccess Ambassador Panel. So to give everyone a brief background on who we are and who you'll be hearing from momentarily, joining us today are some of the crew members of the Flight 1 Mission AstroAccess Parabolic Flight. So this was a zero gravity mission that we did just last month. So we're fresh off the flight in partnership with Zero G, Yuri's Night, and a wide network of amazing partners in the disability and STEM communities. Our AstroAccess ambassadors were competitively selected out of over 100 applicants nationwide for this opportunity to be crew members on this waitlist flight. The goal of Mission AstroAccess is to investigate how spacecrafts can be made more accessible for the future of astronauts with disabilities. And so that's our long-term vision for this mission. And currently, we are looking for new partners and new funding opportunities in order to secure future zero-G flights and ultimately future space flights that are providing access and equity for all. So I'm really excited to be joined by this amazing group of ambassadors today. And I'd love to start things off by just having each person go ahead and introduce themselves. So please, each ambassador, share your name, where you're from, and a little bit about your work. So what you do, so that each of us can get to meet all of you. So to start things off, I'll go to Dr. Sherry Wells Jensen. Oh, and Sherry, I think you're on mute. Sherry, by the way, is a returning AstroAccess speaker. She was one of our featured speakers in 2019 for our inaugural event at Ohio State. So we're super excited to have Sherry joining today as one of our AstroAccess ambassadors. It looks like the mute is still on, but if you like Sherry, I can go ahead to Eric Shear, and we can circle back after Eric. So Eric Shear, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Sure. My name is Eric Shear. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a white male with very, very, very short hair. So currently, I'm a grad student in chemical engineering at the University of Florida, studying life support in space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eric. And next, I'd love to go to Sawyer Rosenstein.
My name is Sawyer Rosenstein. My pronouns are he, him. I am currently wearing a blue collared shirt. I am a TV news producer in the West Palm Beach, Florida area, and I am also the host of a podcast called Talking Space and a member of the press corps for rocket launches.
Sorry, can you tell us what's behind you right now?
Sure. Behind me right now, I have a wall full of astronaut photos and autographs. Below that is a glass display case, of which almost all the items inside have been flown in space, as well as models of all of the different rockets that I have seen launch and a Lego ISS as well.
It's just the best Zoom, anything behind someone on Zoom I've ever seen. So I love to highlight that. Thank you, Sawyer. Next up, Mary, could you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Everyone, super excited to be here today. I use she, her pronouns. My name's Mary. I'm a white female that has long brown hair, and I'm wearing like a beige sweater today. I'm a current senior here at Stanford University, majoring in aerospace engineering and computer science. I am about to enter the real world soon, hopefully, and I'm looking forward to all my experience for Mission AstroAccess as it leads me away from college into the commercial space industry, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mary. Also, quick shout out to the Brooke Owens Fellowship, which is how I first met Mary, which is an amazing program that promotes opportunities for women and gender minority students in aerospace. Next up, Zubi, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks so much. And hi, I am Zubi. My pronouns are he and him. I am wearing a dark colored sweater and dark rimmed glasses. I'm the founder of Think and Zoom, Brain Control Solutions. I'm the patented inventor of brain control for blind assistive tech. I'm a global disability advocate and also the founder of Future of Disability, which examines disability from the perspective of technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, as well as investable opportunities. Glad to be here with you.
Amazing. And Zuby also has a session later in the conference, so you can be sure to learn more about his work at his session. So check out our schedule to join him later on. And Sherry, I see you're back in the room. Welcome back.
Thank you, and I apologize for that. My name is Sherry Wells Jensen. I am my pronouns are she, her. I'm a white female, and I have a warm fuzzy blanket wrapped around me because I'm broadcasting from my chilly basement, and you can see a brick wall and wind chimes behind me. I'm an associate professor of linguistics at Bowling Green State University, and my areas of research are astrobiology and disability studies. I'm delighted to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sherry. Next up, we'll go to Victoria Modesta.
Hey guys, really great to see everyone again. My name is Victoria Modesta, and my pronouns are they, them, and I have blonde and black hair, and I'm wearing a flesh-colored top with little moons all over. So I'm a bionic performing artist and a creative director. I've been a fellow at MIT Media Lab, and you tend to find me combining innovative technology and science with pop culture and entertainment. And that's sort of, that's my jam. And it's really great to be here.
Thank you so much, Victoria. It's great to have you. Next up, I'll turn it over to Sina.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Sina Baram. Excuse me, I use he, his, him pronouns. I'm wearing a blazer and have dark, wavy hair, have light skin. I'm the president and founder of a company called Prime Access Consulting. We look at the concept of inclusive design and helping everyone from nonprofits to technology companies, think tanks, large and small companies, really concentrate on creating the most welcoming environment for the widest possible audience. And I'm actually coming to you today from Santa Fe. The curator of the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum very kindly loaned me her office so I could join you this morning, but I live in North Carolina regularly in Cary.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, I'd love to turn it over to Apurva Varia, who will also be giving one of our keynote addresses tomorrow. So Apurva, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, everyone. Good morning to those on the East Coast. My name is Apurva Varia. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a deaf male communicating through a sign language interpreter. I work at NASA as a mission operations director for 3 spacecraft. And I have a brown skin, short hair, wearing a bomber jacket and glasses. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Apurva. Fantastic. So the way today's panel will work is I will ask our panelists a few questions, and so we'll go through and hear their answers, and that'll be for the first half. And then the second half is totally up to the audience. So it'll be all Q&A discussion. So we encourage you, as you think of them, to please use the Q&A to add your questions there, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. You're also welcome to use the raise hand icon if you prefer to ask a question aloud. And lastly, if you'd like to ask a question in sign language, you can let us know by setting that request in the Q&A, and we'll be able to turn on your video so that you can ask a question in ASL. So first up, I'd love to go around and have each ambassador just tell us a little bit more about what exactly you did on the flight. So as I shared at the beginning, this was a 0G flight. For those who aren't familiar, the way this works, we take a plane and it goes up and down in parabolas. And at the top of that parabola, our ambassadors experienced weightlessness for about 25 seconds. And then the plane repeated this 15 times. And each ambassador was working on different tasks and demonstrations inside the plane. And so I'd love each of you to please tell us a little bit about exactly what you did and what you were looking at and anything you might have discovered. So anything you might have learned from that experience. So to start things off, I'd love to turn it back to Eric Shear.
So a few things I forgot to mention. I'm also deaf using a sign language interpreter, as with Apurva. So that's why you hear the same voice. So let's get that out of the way. In our group, we were supposed to do 3 experiments on our flight. One of them was we were trying to sign to each other in 0G, so basically in free fall. And secondly, we were trying a light notification system to see if we could see the lights when we were going into and out of the parabolas. We had different color lights to indicate different parts of the flight. The third experiment we were trying out was haptics. We had like a little haptic feedback watch that vibrated in our pocket that was on our sleeve. But the results were, for the signing, well, we couldn't sign at all during free fall. We were just too out of control physically. I was trying to focus my best on not hitting anyone or not hitting the wall or not hitting my head. So I think for the next flight, we might need some kind of either handholds, footholds, or something along those lines to improve the ability to test that. So, and as for the lights, we couldn't see the lights because they were on the floor shining up. And I believe that we would have seen the lights better if they were on the wall or the ceiling because we were laying down facing up. And then when we were in free fall, I didn't necessarily know where the floor was. I didn't know where anything was sometimes. So, because everything became the floor. So it was kind of hard to know where I had to look and how I was oriented to see the lights. And then for the haptics, it wasn't really connected to our skin because it was in a pocket on our sleeve. So we could sometimes feel it, but it wasn't like really against the skin. So a lot of times we missed it, especially during free fall, because it was floating away from our skin. So just lessons learned for next time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eric. And Apurva, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you could share how that experience was for you, signing and free fall, and any other observations and lessons learned from your end.
Sure. I think what Eric described pretty much covered almost everything I was going to say. But really, being in free fall was just amazing. It was such a great experience to feel weightless. It was so much joy. But from the tech perspective, it was a challenge. With the lighting system, like he said, they was on the floor. I think it would be best to move them up to make it more visual. And the haptics, they were a great first shot, but I think there are ways to make it better for next time. And then I think the toughest ones of those 3 to test is the signing, because I have to figure out as I'm signing, do I move myself? Do I not? And then I have to grab a hold of something because I have no way to orient myself and I'm out of control. So we were trying to test out if one of us could be upside down and the other one right side up, and we could understand each other, but we didn't have a chance to do that. I personally don't think that would work very well for communication, but something to test out.
Great. Thank you so much, Apurva. Next up, I'd love to turn it over to Sawyer to talk about your experience.
So mine, I had 3 basic ideas that I was testing. One was station keeping, so basically staying in place. Another was point-to-point movement. And then the last one was all about different body positions. So with the body positions, the first was making sure that my legs didn't do the splits, because I can tell you I'm not a gymnast, and that would be very uncomfortable. So one of the things that we had done on my suit was we just added a piece of Velcro onto a fabric that we had that was between the knees and the ankles, and it was stationary on one of my shins. And then when it came time for flight, we just pulled it across, and that actually held my legs together and kept them exactly in place. So that worked fantastically. The other thing was position-wise testing, getting into sort of a kneeling or bent up type position to also check range of motion, but most importantly, just find kind of a comfortable spot to float around in. So there was a modification also made to my suit where there was a sort of epaulette type thing on the leg that was made so that I could stick 1 or 2 fingers underneath it. And then since my legs were connected by the Velcro, I could then pull them up towards my chest. And it worked perfectly until I then looked up and realized that it gave me upward momentum and my nose was about to bump into the ceiling most of the time. So later on during the flight, we were able to find more sustainable ways to bend in my knees and then also maintain my position. And then moving point to point, was able to bounce back and forth between different spots. And with the help of 2 people that were with me on the flight, 14 out of the 15 parabolas, we were able to safely get me back to the landing area. Considering I can't use my legs in any way, shape, or form, that was one of the concerns, was the positioning of them and making sure that I could align myself where I needed to be safely. And that was successful.
Great. Thank you so much, Sawyer. Next up, Mary, would you like to share your experience?
Yeah, so kind of similar to Sawyer, that I was really focused on station keeping throughout the entire flight, which is basically keeping your orientation and your position away from a fixed point. And really the reason that Sawyer just described everything he did is because eventually the goal of Mission AstroAccess is to fly suborbital, which is super exciting. And one of the main challenges of flying suborbital is getting back in your seat when you're about to re-enter and doing a 5-point harness. And so we had a designated area, all of us, that at the end of the parabola, as we're coming back out, our goal was to get there. And so it was really cool to kind of like mess around, go as far as I can. And I was right next to Victoria, so we had a lot of fun on the flight as well. And then get back to that designated space. And to touch on the having fun part too, I think that was definitely one of our missions as well. We wanted to just get on the flight and show that, like anyone else that goes on a 0G flight, we can have a great time. And if you look at any of the photos, there's huge smiles on all our faces. And I think that really speaks for itself. Like, we really didn't need any, or if anything, accommodation wise, to get on the flight. And that's really cool. Honestly, you're looking at a group of some pretty badass of my fellow crew members. So I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. And I will share some photos in a little bit so everyone can take a look at some photos from the flight. So you mentioned your fellow crewmate, Victoria. So Victoria, I'd love to turn it over to you to talk about your experience.
Yeah, sure. Well, I feel like a lot of the actual work and concentration happened for me kind of before the flight. I spent quite a lot of time, as a person who really enjoys design and fashion and kind of like the impact that can have. I spent quite a lot of time researching adaptive design and really kind of looking at like where things could go. So that was really one of my main focuses. We did manage to modify all of the flight suits with some additional high visibility sort of details, and really kind of just I really wanted all of us to kind of stand out a little bit and to look great in our images, and to also be able to implement some additional adaptive sort of items like like what Sawyer mentioned, and things like that. I think Dana was, one among few people who really needed a lot of modification to her suit. So that was very interesting, as somebody who works, with garments, like that was very fascinating, at how much, adaptive design and smart technology that's already readily available can just completely transform your experience and just make it so much more comfortable. On the flight itself, I definitely was, apart from all of the kind of basics of station keeping and getting back into your seat, I did have a couple of creative stretch goals, which was super fun. I did try using this kind of awesome mixed reality kind of capture app that unfortunately with it being on a plane had glitches. So we had a little failure, but we tried. And really mostly I think, as a physical performer, I kind of just really wanted to try to understand how can zero gravity really inform the future design of not only, what the person wears, but everything around them. So my brain was kind of ticking like really hard because I'm very multidisciplinary and I work with a lot of different folks. And, I think I feel like everyone just walked away with so much stuff to think about but what Mary said is like, the adaptations and the small considerations just make such a massive difference. And, I think all of us could easily continue missions like that without, needing to change absolutely everything, which I think was really one of the goals. So yeah, I think, but I walked away just like wanting to just be in weightlessness for a long period of time and sort of ponder like, what does that mean? And what are the most, what are the exciting things that you can do? So yeah, really, really fascinating and not as crazy physically as one would expect. I was very relieved that, the stuff in between the parabolas felt way more intense than the parabolas themselves. I think being in weightlessness, and even though being a one leg amputee, I'm kind of lucky. I don't get too physically constrained, most days. Like I'm fairly liberated now with my movements and stuff. But I think it's so magical to be able to transcend your physical normal ability and find new ability. Like what does that look like? If Sawyer spent a lot of time in zero gravity, like how would his movements adapt? What would his new body language would be? So yeah, it's a lot to think about. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Victoria. And so, yeah, just for everyone following along, as Victoria mentioned, in between the microgravity, there's actually hypergravity. So in those in between periods, I would totally agree that was a lot more difficult where you're feeling 1.8 Gs, so almost twice the force of regular gravity before you get to the weightlessness at the top of each parabola. So very interesting dynamics there. Wonderful. All right. I'd love to turn it over to Zuby to talk about your experience.
Thanks so much. And yeah, it's so great to be back with the team of ambassadors and hearing and reliving those moments. For me, I was one of 4 members of the blind team, and I'll let Sherry and Sina will talk about other aspects of the experiments or demonstrations that we wanted to take part in. But for me, one of the stretch goals was actually to try out and figure out if it was possible for humans to use their brains to control electronic devices while floating around in zero gravity. And so that was a stretch goal. And I was very pleasantly surprised that, yeah, it's possible, it worked. I didn't know what to expect. And what I'm really talking about is leveraging brain-computer interface, meaning simply thinking, using our thoughts to be able to control electronic devices. And so being the inventor of brain control for blind assistive tech, naturally, I wanted to try this out to know if I could be able to just think and zoom in to make things bigger, or think and control screen reading. Now, the screen reading part, there wasn't enough time, or the environment wasn't suitable to do that. I was cautioned not to do that because trying to read in that environment could trigger some unwanted, maybe nausea or things like of that nature. So I just focused on being able to leverage the brain control to zoom in. And so the demonstration was pleasant, it worked. And so in the future, don't be surprised if you see astronauts in space using their brains to control devices. So for me, it was a huge success, and I was really, really proud to have been able to pull that off.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Zuby. Next up, I'll turn it over to Sina.
It was magical. It was truly a magical experience. I've been a huge fan of just speculative fiction and thinking about existing in space for such a long time. And so to be able to experience microgravity was one of the most delightful experiences I've ever had. So just major thanks, by the way, to everybody who made that possible, because there was so much effort and love and labor that went into this. So extreme gratitude. In the blind team, we had a couple of experiments to run. One of the things is that does Braille display work in microgravity, right? So I happen to be a Braille reader, right? I'm blind, and so can you use a Braille display in microgravity? A Braille display, for those who may not be familiar, is a electromechanical device which actuates pins that move up and down, right? And that forms the dots of Braille instead of having it on paper. But a lot of Braille displays are piezoelectric, and so therefore they have to, they're relying on basically some assumptions about one gravity. If you take that into microgravity, what does it mean? We were able to test one from Orbit Research, which actually has a little locking spring in place, so it keeps the pins in place, and our hypothesis was that means it would work equally well in 1 gravity, in microgravity, and in 1.8 Gs as well, and that's exactly what happened. We were concerned that maybe in 1.8 gravities it would be really sluggish or slow to use. Nope, it did really well, so that was really fantastic. And then the other areas I concentrated on was station keeping. Mary spoke wonderfully about what that is and what that means, but if you're blind, how do you then return to a known place? How do you stay in a given area? And how do you know if you have imparted any inertia on yourself, or any has been imparted upon you in terms of spin or in terms of velocity, right? So these are the kinds of questions we wanted to get to. And what I found fascinating was also that in addition to microgravity, 1.8 gravities, and regular gravity, we also experienced a little bit of negative gravity, where when you're going through the parabolas experiencing microgravity, you might experience a tug upwards, right? And honestly, that was more disorienting. That's an artifact of a microgravity flight. That's not something that tends to happen, from my understanding, of course, in proper freefall. But that was honestly more disorienting for me than microgravity was. Able to return back to a known starting point relatively well across the various parabolas, and we have a lot more work to do because it is a loud environment. So when we were testing audio cues, we couldn't hear them at all. But the vibrotactile feedback that we had I had one in my arm pocket in my suit jacket, it was able to work just fine. So lots of areas of exploration left to do. Really excited to explore further.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sina. And last but not least, we have Sherry. Please tell us about your experience.
So just to continue on with what Sina was saying, it is really, really loud. So in order to equip the 727 for the maneuvers that they have to make, they take a lot of the soundproofing off of the planes. So you get regular airplane noises, and all of that is not filtered through the regular soundproofing. So you have the sounds of a regular air flight that you're probably familiar with. You amplify those to around the sound that you would get standing sort of close to, say, a lawnmower, which is something that for the Midwest folks. So a big, or a motorcycle, you're standing right next to that thing. So it was really loud, and the intervals that we had to experiment with were real short. So maybe 25 seconds, maybe 20 seconds. They weren't all the same length. And the first bit of it was all about, okay, here I'm floating again. And then the last few seconds was all about coming back down. So we didn't have very much time in between. And like Sim said, it was really, really loud, and the negative Gs were quite something. So my 2 tasks were specifically with the audio beacons, which we discovered were not quite loud enough to make it over the noise floor. And so we need to experiment with how to increase communication, and maybe to experiment with those in the next flight. And my Braille literacy task, because you can't have an astronaut that's not able to write things down. So Sina tested the 21st century Braille display. I was testing the 19th century. How do you write? Can you write with a slate and stylus in free fall? And yes, Yes, you can. If you're using two hands, you have to be okay with floating around the cabin while you do that. If you don't like that or wanted to anchor yourself, then I was able to write with one hand while using another hand to sort of grab onto a cushion on the floor to try to keep myself in place. So both literacy technologies in both centuries worked out pretty well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sherry. We are at the halfway mark, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to our audience questions. But before I do, I did promise to show some photos. So I'll share my screen now so that everyone can see a little bit about what we're talking about and what this weightlessness actually looks like. So on this first photo, we have a picture of Sawyer. Sawyer, I believe this might have been during the lunar parabola. I'm not sure. Can you tell? Do you know which parabola we're in here?
This may have been one of the lunar parabolas, or no, I think actually this was one of the later on ones.
Zero, got it.
Yeah.
Very cool. So yeah, so to share with everyone, we started out in Martian gravity and then progressed to lunar gravity and then finally to 0G. So we actually did our tests in 3 different environments. And to the right of Sawyer, we have Mary. In front of her, her prosthetic leg is floating in front of her and her long hair is floating all around. And all of these photos, our ambassadors are in black space suits, in black jumpsuits. Next up, we have a Purva floating all 4 limbs out in 0G. And next to him, we have Victoria doing an incredible back bend midair, which is very, very amazing and artistic. I wanted to show one photo of Eric Shear upside down. So Eric and Apurva mentioned that they were practicing attempting to sign reversed. So in this photo, Eric is fully upside down with his feet on the ceiling. And next to that, we have Sina and Sherry doing some tests in the front of the plane. I believe Sina here is actually holding that Braille display. So he's currently mid-test that. And in this photo, Sherry is smiling and making her way back to her mat. So as was mentioned by Mary, every person had a mat that simulated their space seat on a spacecraft. And so everyone had to practice station keeping and returning to that home base. Here we have a photo of Zuby floating in the air and holding up his ThinkZoom technology. So he's wearing his device on his head and holding up his technology to the camera. And next to him, Mona, who's one of the ambassadors who unfortunately could not join us today. Mona is one of the ambassadors in our blind crew, and in this photo is smiling wildly and is floating on the ceiling. And up next, we have Cece, another ambassador who couldn't join us today, who is in our mobility disability crew. She's floating with long black hair in braids floating all around her and her arms outstretched to both sides. And last up, we have 2 photos from our final 2 ambassadors who, again, weren't able to join for today, but I wanted to feature everyone for you to see. On the left, we have Eric Ingram, who is walking sideways along the wall with his hands along the wall and his feet basically with his body parallel to the ground. And Dana, who is another member of our mobility disability ambassador group. Dana has 2 prosthetic hook arms and is climbing along a rope alongside the spacecraft using her prosthetic arms. And behind her is actually Katie Coleman, who is a former NASA astronaut who is one of our support crew on the flight. So just wanted to go ahead and share some photos from the exciting day so everyone can get a sense of the event. Oh, and lastly, just to share with everyone, here is a photo of everyone who was on the flight. So this is a picture of everyone who's on the flight. I'd like to highlight George Whitesides, whose foundation actually made this flight possible, who's my co-founder for AstroAccess. He's waving in the back with a peace sign, and our entire onboard crew is here. In addition to the people in this photo, there were dozens of people outside the plane making this possible. So with that, we have questions pouring in. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, letting our audience ask away. First up, I'm going to call on Haley Thurston, who has her hand raised. So Haley, I've just enabled microphone access. If you want to go ahead and try unmuting yourself, you should be able to ask your question out loud.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Perfect, first time. Anyway, I would like to ask, what are par- w- parabolas?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you asked that.
I have no clue what they are. I am not a science student.
No worries, Haley. Thank you so much for asking. I'm sure many people, if you have a question, I'm sure many others have it too. So I'm glad you asked for clarification. So a parabola is just the general name for the shape that the plane moves in. And so in this case, it's basically a slope. So imagine a hill. So it's a slope essentially. And so the plane goes up and down in this smooth repeated slope, sort of what you would see with a sine wave or a cosine wave. So it's basically think of a wave. And so the parabola we're referring to is the plane moving in this repeated wave motion. Does that answer your question?
That makes sense.
Great. Thank you so much, Haley. And I see one other hand raised. So we'll go to Amrita Suresh and allow you to turn on your microphone whenever you're ready.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Amrita, and I really want to become the first female autistic astronaut.
Amazing.
The ISS, because I'm really interested in space technologies and all that. And I can walk, I can speak, I can talk. I have every capability a normal person has. So is it possible for me?
Well, first thing I would say, one of the things I think are, first, thank you for being here. And that's so amazing. And the answer is yes. One thing I will say, though, is that one of the things that we're proving with this flight is that you don't need to walk, then you don't need to speak, and you don't need to talk to be an astronaut. And so those are the different things that AstroAccess is demonstrating, that there are many different ways to communicate, and that we believe all types of disabilities should be included and it should be accessible. But the answer, I believe, is yes, absolutely. There needs to be more neurodiversity for astronauts. And I'd open that up to any of the panelists. If any of our ambassadors would like to comment on that, you should feel free to do so.
I can take
Yes.
it.
Mary, go ahead.
I don't have a neurodiverse disability. I'm a below the knee amputee, but I think one amazing thing from this flight was that everyone can really look at all our unique disabilities and look at them as strengths and how they actually make any space flight or any space mission so much safer just in general. Aerospace as a whole is a very risk focused industry. It's a high risk maneuvers. And so just safety redundancies in general are naturally built in. And when you think about accessible design and accessible solutions and looking at disabilities and our just natural resiliency and kind of like a natural engineering mindset it gives each of us, that's a really amazing strength for any astronaut. So I think everything you said is super valid and completely true. And like Anna said, the answer is 1,000% yes. And I think when you word your question, you need to not even just ask if it's possible. I think you need to say that this is why it's possible, and this is why I'm stronger than any other candidate.
Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you, Amrita, for that question. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next, I'll turn to our chat where we have many questions pouring in for our ambassadors. First, I'll go to one from Lisa, who says, as a blind and low vision participant, can you elaborate on your experience for orientation for the 6-point direction system while in lunar, Martian, and zero gravity?
I'm happy to speak to that a little bit. I think it's really interesting to think about direction keeping and station keeping, because if you're on the ground and you're experiencing one gravity, you have a sense of where things are and they don't move unless if you do something, right? So like walls tend to stay still, buildings tend to stay still, unless if things are going very badly. And so the issue with being in microgravity is that even if you don't do anything or you don't perceive that you're doing anything, you could be upside down, you could be spinning, you could be facing a different direction. And it's interesting that you mentioned a 6-point direction system, because I think that's exactly correct. That one of the things I'm really excited to trying next is sonifying, so the use of sounds to convey spatial information, right? A gyroscope or other means of letting you know whether you can see or not, frankly. I think it would be helpful for many people through sound and through vibrotactile feedback, so vibrations and touch-based actuation, what your direction is, what your velocity is. And then you can also start modifying the environment to give these clues as well. For example, imagine something like a horsehair cloth or a fabric or any kind of fabric that's directional in nature. If you run your fingertips across the wall just gently or across any surface and you notice that it's going in a different direction than what you thought, maybe little dots are becoming big dots or big dots are becoming little dots, that sort of thing. Any kind of directionality we can put into the environment. This not only helps somebody who can't see, but it's also really critical for someone who may not be able to use their eyes at that particular moment because they're managing an emergency or something along those lines and are using their eyes to do those things, but can still rely on their other senses in order to know about their orientation. So just really going back to this idea of inclusive design, right? But those are some of the thoughts that we're really excited about exploring next, and I think it's a spot-on question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sina.
Thank you.
Lisette wants to know, did anyone get physically ill during the flight? Luckily, no. It's, that happens on 0G, but everyone was good. Eric, I see Eric and Apurva answering. In fact, Eric, would you maybe want to comment on that? Because one thing we didn't talk about is how a lot of deaf individuals are actually immune to motion sickness. So maybe you could tell our audience a little bit about that.
Sure, you're absolutely right. Because I don't know if everyone here knows about the Gallaudet 11, which was a group of deaf men back in the 50s and 60s who NASA experimented on in these 0G flights, and none of them got motion sickness. And this is actually my second flight. And on either one of the flights, I did not get sick. Apurva didn't either. So I believe it has a lot to do with your inner ear. And how do I want to explain this? I know there's something to do with the fluid in your inner ear and how it moves around, and the hair follicles in your cochlea, how they kind of move around as well. But yeah, we don't have that issue nearly as often. Although Apurva wants to add, yeah, I didn't get sick, like as if you were getting motion sickness on a cruise or in a car. But what I did was I did take some medicine a couple hours before just to make sure, which was a good thing. But I'm thinking some deaf people may get sick, but on this flight, I felt great. And the plane itself was really cold. So that really reduced the chances of vomiting. So yeah. Eric also wants to add that I didn't take any medication. I know Apurva did, but I did not.
Great. Thank you both so much. And great question. I'm glad somebody asked it. So next question here. There's one question, is there going to be another flight with the same crew? So the idea with AstroAccess is that we will have future flights and we actually want to have more applications and welcome new crew members into the team as well. And so definitely keep an eye on astroaccess.org as the project grows and as it expands. I think everybody here wants to go as many times as we can. There's a lot of nodding heads and smiles and across the panelists. But I think the main thing I want to communicate is that we're really looking to expand, bringing new people, new partners, and to be able to provide this opportunity to as many people as possible. So really excellent question. Next up, we have one from Shelby, who says, I'm terrible at math and science, but it's always been a dream of mine to be part of the space program. I'm currently in a position where I'm trying to find careers, but has been increasingly difficult because of COVID. Also, I'm in a place where public transit is non-existent. I would love to be given a chance to work in the space program in some capacity, in spite of being terrible at math and science. I'd love to learn about the possibility of making space travel more accessible. Where can I turn to as far as searching for career opportunities? Thank you, Shelby, for that great question. I'd love to maybe turn it over to Apurva first to talk about if you have maybe any advice for Shelby, and then any other ambassadors who want to chime in, feel free to raise your hand or to just jump in.
Actually, anyone who has a passion for science or math, it doesn't matter if you're good at it or not, can do whatever, can be an astronaut. It really doesn't matter. What's really important is that you work hard and you keep that passion. I mean, personally, I didn't really like math. I mean, I did, but I struggled with it. So I studied more with other people and with mentors, with role models. And if you just follow their advice, study hard, you'll be successful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Apurva.
Can I add a quick comment to that?
Please,
So, there's the engineering and the STEM side of things, right? The science, technology, engineering, and math. But what we need if we're going to be a successful interplanetary species is for the full expression of human creativity to exist in whatever environment we're in. I'm currently in the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. This is not a science museum. It's not a science center. There are some brilliant creative people here. And we need all those types of roles when we're doing things like designing space stations, when we're thinking about habitats, when we're thinking about how people are going to eat and thrive in space, how musicians are going to play instruments in space. There are so many more considerations than just the engineering. We tend to all talk about the engineering a lot. A lot of us have backgrounds in that kind of space, but just to say that if you're passionate about space, full stop, there are so many opportunities for you to contribute. And honestly, the areas where folks might not even think that there is a need is a really great indicator of somewhere you could probably make a ton of progress and a ton of success, moving us forward. So don't feel like only having STEM related skills are the requirements in order to participate in this new space age that we're in.
Thank you so much for that addition, Sina. And one thing I'll add is that there are so many internship opportunities for students in the space world that aren't specific to math and to science and to engineering. And one great thing about NASA specifically is they have a robust student internship program. And there are actually things, Victoria might be interested in this, there's actually things like fashion design for spacesuits. And there is, plant biology for growing food in space. So there's so many different things that you wouldn't even know exist that don't require you to have a mathematics background. So that's definitely something to look into and continue exploring. And the people in this room aren't all just scientists. Many of us are, but we have, Victoria is a bionic pop artist. Mary is a competitive athlete. Sawyer is a professional science communicator. Sherry is a professor of linguistics, right? So the people even in this room have many interests and areas of expertise that aren't strictly math and science. So that's something to share as well. Victoria, speaking of you, we have a question for you from Gabriel, who wants to know how STEMsign, the sign language STEM group he runs, could collaborate to empower children with disabilities to design spacesuits, especially deaf children to design using their hands and fingers to move and articulate a lot.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the best thing for something like that is definitely, do an extensive sort of design sprint, which is something that we've kind of done before. But really, I think, with any project like that, it's really important to find like some kind of a partner or collaborator that would document the project and that would kind of like get the word out there. I feel like, there's probably a lot of ideas within that little bubble of people already. So, but I actually, it really caught my ear, the previous question is, so I'm somebody that has spent majority of my childhood in a hospital. I think in total in my whole life, I maybe spent 3 years in traditional schooling and many years later, I found myself as a fellow at MIT Media Lab, performing a Paralympic closing ceremony, becoming a young European leader for Friends of Europe. I mean, I think the moral of the story here is, I think how you showcase engagement with the culture and society around you, and how you sort of just bring your personal knowledge and interests together is really kind of where it's at. I feel like any worries that I've had previously about, how am I going to proceed in my career without traditional education have just they just kept disappearing, because I think also never underestimate how much you can teach yourself out there. Like educating yourself in anything and being able to enroll in anything you want at a later time is easier than ever right now. So I feel like, there's just like no limitations. How things start for you is not how they should sort of end up, So sorry, I hope that I answered the first question correctly. But actually, just adding to that, I think the thing that has made a lot, I do a lot of projects that are about completely innovating the process and completely creating something that hasn't been done before. And the thing that has been working very successfully for me is definitely the collaboration with different types of industry and different types of folks that really think differently but have a mutual goal, which is kind of like what we're doing here, just especially when it comes to adaptive design or design that stems from having some kind of physical disability. You just want to get everyone around the table. You want to get maybe a traditional designer and maybe some people that work in photography and or presentation, and just really get like a soup of ideas going. So
amazing.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Victoria. We have a question here from Lisa, who asks, Anna, tell me about your personal experience in lunar immersion in zero gravity. So Lisa, the one thing I do want to share is that what I thought was really interesting, in the hypergravity, it caused me to have back pain in my lower back. And as soon as we transitioned to microgravity, it instantly disappeared, which was really bizarre to me because obviously pain can start suddenly, but I didn't know it could stop suddenly. And I thought that kind of had really interesting implications just for, the benefits of microgravity in general. So that was kind of the thing that I thought was most interesting, was this experience of having that pain caused by gravity immediately disappear as soon as we transition. So that was very fascinating. We are unfortunately reaching the end of our hour. The amazing Sarisha Bandla will be joining us momentarily to give her keynote address at noon. And so definitely stay here for Sarisha. We do have maybe a minute for each ambassador to maybe say, one sentence. If there's anything else you'd like to add, I'd love to give you each the opportunity to maybe say one sentence, any closing thoughts that you might not have gotten to share. And I'd love to start with Sherry.
So one of the things that I think is super important that we have not said yet is that what we were doing was microgravity experiences on a parabolic flight, which is really loud, and the moments of microgravity are really short. The great thing is that on a suborbital flight, and certainly aboard ISS, it won't be quite as loud. Well, there's still some loudness there. It's not a quiet meadow. But some of the problems that we have aboard the parabolic flight in terms of blind folks orienting might not be as severe when we actually get into outer space. So things will just keep getting better.
Thank you, Sherry. Victoria, is there anything you'd like to add? I think you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Great.
Yeah, I think the biggest sort of like takeaway for me at the moment, and something that I'd like everyone to think about, is that, this is very much a new frontier. And I think that whatever previous ideas have been about, the type of person that should be attracted to space or the type of skills that are needed, it's like, if we're going to move the human experience into space, like every single opinion and every single experience really matters here. And we just don't really know where important breakthroughs are going to come. So I think, I hope that with this flight, and with the specific mission that we did, it's just sort of like a nice little entry point to show that, this really is, spaces for everybody to, bring their idea to it. And it doesn't have to be limited to any specific thing. And having all of us, intersect here with different experiences is really it, like having a common sort of goal. So yeah, see what happens.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Mary, would you like to share your one sentence takeaways for our attendees today?
Yeah, kind of going off that, there really is a space for everyone here, and our crew are kind of like a team, and someone on our team said it really well, is that if you want to go far, you go with a team. If you want to go fast, you go alone. And I think Mission AstroAccess is trying to go far, and if anyone is interested, to please reach out. We would love to have you on the team.
Thank you, Mary. Sawyer.
For me, as someone who's been following the space program as a reporter basically for 10 years, we are in an era that we've never seen before. We have so many brand new spacecraft that are flying for the first time and are flying people in particular. And I think that means that we are coming in at just the right time. It's so much easier to design spacecraft with the modifications already in them than it is to try and retrofit something. And we've seen that in everyday life, I think, most of us with ADA. But now is the time to do it. So I think we're finally all getting in here at the exact right moment in history. So let's make space for everybody now, as opposed to trying to modify it later.
Thank you so much. Zuby. I believe you're muted.
I'll leave everybody with a quote: always look, think, and zoom. And what that means is this. It took two people who had the idea to look into a better, brighter future, meaning George and Anna, of people with disabilities, right? To come up with this idea to say, hey, let's put disabled people into space. And they formed AstroAccess. So always look towards a better, brighter future. And then think means put together a plan or a strategy, a map, step-by-step guide. Believe me, we had lots and lots and lots of meetings, phone calls, emails. We did a lot of work before the flight. So that's think. And then zoom means to do something, to execute, so you're not stuck in a dream by just thinking. And so we did get on that flight and we executed and we floated and experienced the different gravity, right? So I'll leave everybody with that quote. Always look, think, and zoom into a better, brighter future. Always look, think, and zoom.
Thank you so much, Zuby. Eric.
The one thought I want to share with everyone is the time in this flight, it passes by so quickly. You have so much fun. You blink and it's literally over.
Thank you, Eric. Apurva.
Our journey is just beginning. I know we're going to have challenges, frustrations, but know that everyone will be here to support each other. We want to be an inspiration to all, because I know people who have a dream to go to space, keep with it. And just remember that.
Beautiful, really well said. And last but not least, Sina.
A few quick thoughts. The first is, if you're someone with a disability or diverse abilities, we, the royal we, humans, need us, because we are problem solvers. In one day, most persons with disabilities solve more problems than most people do in a month. And that's just a true thing. These are the kinds of skills we're going to need if we're going to be successful in space. It's not just a nice to have. We shouldn't approach this work from charity. We need to approach this as a necessity, because space should be so lucky as to have the diversity of skills that persons with disabilities and diverse abilities bring to the table. And also to say that the caliber of human and the combination of kindness and brilliance that was part of this project was just deeply, deeply meaningful to me. There's plenty of smart folks, but for everybody to get in the room and put the mission first was something really magical. And so on that note, just so much gratitude to everyone. And it was so lovely to hear all these amazing voices. Again, I've missed all of you. So thank you so very much.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for being here. That concludes our AstroAccess Ambassador panel. We will take a brief pause here, so just 1 or 2 minutes to go ahead and get set up for our keynote speaker, Sarisha Vandla, who's joining us now. So we're really excited to hear from Sarisha, and we'll go ahead and start in just a couple minutes. So thank you all so much, and stay right in this room. You're all in the right spot, and we'll get started momentarily. Thank you.
AstroAccess. Learn more at www.astraccess.org.